Good morning, everybody. It is March 16th, the day before St. Patty's Day. If you're watching this when we release it, which we release every Wednesday, like clockwork, whether we need to or partner in crime Christian. We have Barbara Bacon and our esteemed guest, Dr. B. I don't even know if you're a guest anymore. I think you're an honorary.
a semi-regular. As Jenny said, welcome to Coffee and Dulce. My name is Christian Cano, one of your co-hosts, along with Jenny Gunn, Barbara Bacon, who's joining us tonight, and Mama Ruth. We are Mama Ruthless tonight. We have a wonderful show tonight, our third show in March.
Doing great. Good to be back. And curiously, Saturday, a week ago, I drove down to Houston to speak to a group of Texas neurosurgeons at their annual meeting on Medicare for All. And you say, why didn't it make common sense? Well, you'd just be amazed the reasons these folks kind of have for thinking this is not a good idea. And then that makes sense. They're all more ideological than practical. But it's kind of astounding, the anxiety that something like Medicare for All provokes in people. So anyway, I understand that on some levels, but it's still discouraging. So I'm George Bonefalk, retired neurosurgeon, and my primary causes are Medicare for All, and in the last couple of years, anti-racism. And for a long time, the first cause I ever did a protest march in was Mothers Against Guns or Mothers Against Gun Violence, whatever. So yeah, certainly I'm all for those things, but particularly my primary advocacy is Medicare for All.
Hi there, I'm Barbara Bacon. I'm a community advocate here in South Charlotte. I say healthcare for all because I have many friends that kind of freak out about Medicare for all, and I'm tired of trying to explain it to them. So I agree, everybody deserves healthcare. I just recently, with my boyfriend, attended a 213-mile marathon trying to raise money for post-traumatic stress syndrome veterans. We are now up to 22 suicides a day by our vets. Our veterans' healthcare is failing. They can't even get appointments for therapy. It's really bad. So this is a local Virginia Beach area and all of North Carolina. These are Marines and active and inactive, and in one weekend we raised $5,000, and it's immediately going to help give them therapy, and that's a start. So anyway, that's a new focus for me, but I wear my little button all the time, and everybody's asking me what it's for, but it's really heartbreaking. So
my name is Lydia Greene, and I'm from Alberta, Canada. I wrote an article last year called 12 years ago, it was called, I was an anti-vaxxer for 12 years and then I changed my mind. That was the first time I had ever written about my journey leaving anti-vax behind. And it was pretty well received. And I just started to go through a lot of my anti-medicine beliefs and just kind of deconstructing that whole journey. I ran into Heather Simpson, and she had a pretty similar story to mine, but different. And I said, we should start something for people like us that are coming out of this anti-vax wellness. And it feels like we left a cult in a lot of ways. And so you kind of need a lot of support coming back from that. And so that's what we've started with Back to the Vax, is just interviewing doctors to address some of the tropes that we believed so wholeheartedly, a support group for parents, not only just to start vaccinating, but vaccinate with confidence so that, they can do it while believing they're doing the best thing for their child and the best thing for their community. And just kind of exposing that frame of mind that we had so people can kind of understand maybe where we came from and how to confront vaccine hesitancy.
Real quickly, before we let you get started here, I just want to let you know that we received an email 2 weeks ago from a gentleman from Florida, and he wanted to remind us that we were mispronouncing Dulce. He said that apparently I must have said Dulce, and you say Dulce, and sometimes we different. The correct way to pronounce Dulce is Dulce. So I just want to make sure that there aren't any people upset at us because we pronounce it. So I'm from Texas. I pronounce it Dulce. So
I need to explain during the break to Lydia what Dulces are. They don't. I don't think they're big things up in Canada, up in the North Territory there. They're kind of like a Hispanic sweet version of poutine.
That's right.
Okay, does that help?
Right. Yes. Okay. Dr. B mentioned. Dulce is a generic term for sweetbread or pastries.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. So it depends on what nationality or what tradition you come from. Like Mexican traditions, some of ours are like conchas. This is a concha, which is just a kind of a puffy pastry.
Oh,
yeah. Some Central America, South American pastries are a little bit different, and Cuban pastries. So it's just kind of a generic term for Dulce, but however you want to pronounce it, they're just delicious.
What got you down out of curiosity, what got you down the path of being anti-vax first before we ask what broke you loose from it? But what was the concern, or what led you down that rabbit hole that got you into the anti-vax movement? Because I know it's quite vast.
Yes, and Lydia,
what led me down the anti-vax path? I'll clarify that I actually had a background in science. I used to be a quality control chemist for a pharmaceutical company before I had kids. And so I always thought of myself as a pro-science person.
Yeah, it's totally understandable, and I'm very sympathetic to your experience, Lydia, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. Let me ask you before we get started, what did you do about your second and third children with vaccines?
I didn't vaccinate them at all. And I look back now because I've done a lot of investigating on the tropes that I believed, and with my daughter, had it been explained, in the moment, it's a localized pain reaction that happens to babies that age. DTaP is a tetanus shot. That shot in an adult is very painful, and in an infant can be very painful too. Like my daughter was only 6 pounds at birth, maybe 9 pounds at her 2-month visit. She was a very tiny baby, and that needle going into the thigh, like that can cause like a lot of pain for a tiny child. And I'm not saying that that's not a big deal, but it's not brain swelling.
Right.
But because I didn't have somebody take my hand and say, bring her in, let's have a look at her together. Like, that would have gone a lot further, I think, than, you're just a first time mom. Like it's, on my own son's autism. So in the anti-vax community, they tell you that vaccines cause autism and neurological problems. And they also talk about it in a very ableist way. And so here I am hearing these women just resentfully almost talk about their autistic children. There's a lot of like pedestal, like the vaccinated children are damaged and the unvaxxed pure child, like it's almost cult-like. Even in that, like cults have a lot of puritanical beliefs, and in anti-vax cult, it's no different. And so they talk about like these damaged children that wreck your marriage, wreck your life, stress you out. And I have this perfect autistic child who makes me so happy. He's just different and he's beautiful. And I'm like naturally just accommodating to his differences because I love him. Like he's great. And he just needs to navigate a little differently, And I missed my own child's autism because I had such an ableist view on what autism was.
Right.
And also, like, how could my child have autism? He's pure and unvaccinated, right?
Yeah.
And then when I came out of this, I was like, because I had a couple people tell me they thought my son was autistic in my family, and I was so offended. Like, how dare you say that about my child? And then as soon as I came around about vaccines, I just was sitting one day and I just felt the color drain from my face, and I was just like, oh my goodness. like, I need to get him assessed. And then I took him to the family doctor and I told her my concerns, and she has an autistic son herself. And she's like, I can't give him a diagnosis right now. Like, he needs to see a specialist, but I'm telling you to brace yourself for a diagnosis. And he's got level 2 autistic spectrum disorder was what he was diagnosed under the DSM.
No, I understand how you got into this entirely. And I'm very sympathetic, and you know, it's unfortunate that we have these encounters that give people this mistrust. And, you know, it's kind of like we're talking about the whole democracy thing and right now, and this distrust in government and distrust in institutions. And, you know, that's exactly what you experienced. And there you go. So, so I guess the next question is how you got out of it. So what was the kind of procedure?
So a lot of the things that anti-vaxxers talk about are like, well, what can we attribute to the reduction of disease? And they'll say that sanitation had a much bigger part than any vaccine. And yet, in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of resistance to basic courtesies of like wearing a mask, washing your hands, like all the time, sanitizer. Like, the same people that profess that sanitation was like the big reason we're now like resisting other methods to control a virus. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, yeah.
Wow. This is amazing.
By the way, thanks for sharing, Lydia. I know that no matter how many times you've had this talk or gone to, talk shows and it's still like I can still hear your voice crack a few times, and he's still reliving that trauma, reliving some sort of mom guilt and all that is powerful. But the cool thing is that you broke the cycle and now can inspire your kids to think critically, question themselves, because hey, mom got it wrong. Yeah, I got misinformed, and it's easy to go down that. But what a great example that you fought through it and you figured out a way out. And that's also kudos to you too. If you carry the shame, you also should carry the credit.
This is nothing like I thought. Meaning, I've had this vision of what an anti-vaxxer was and is. And that vision, admittedly, is more of a, you're not the boss of me. I don't know. I am being educated at this moment because not every anti-vaxxer, I mean, it's silly that I would even think that every anti-vaxxer is the same, but I don't know, Barbara, you have some anti-vaxxers in your family.
Yes.
And so do I. And they're, you want to comment on anything before we go back to Dr. B? Or?
I think my eyebrow went up when I hear that, she was a chemist for a pharmaceutical company. It intrigued me that you would leave your science-based background and become an anti-vaxxer. But that being said, I have a neighbor that's a nurse, and the only reason she got vaccinated is because her son said, "Mom, you cannot see the new baby unless you're vaccinated." And that is the only reason. And I'm like, you're a nurse.
And wanted to be a nurse someday, but I couldn't do it having anti-vax views because there's a conflict there. Like, morally, if I feel like I'm poisoning somebody with something, I cannot do that job, right? So I kind of put off my dreams of being a nurse, ever, because of that kind of moral conflict. And so when nurses are anti-vax, it's very confusing to me, because how do you have a profession in evidence-based medicine, but advocate against a marvel? Like, antibiotics and vaccines have saved more lives than anything in the history of humankind. Like, you are likely here because one of your descendants got vaccinated or took antibiotics. Really. So I don't understand.
And nor do I. And there have always, since the beginning of time, been physicians who don't believe in it. And during the COVID pandemic, I mean, you turn on Fox News every night, Laura Ingraham and these other yo-yos will have some off, what do you call them? Offbeat, doctor kind of saying, "Oh, you need to take hydroxychloroquine and all these things." And you had this Scott Atlas, is the advisor to Trump. Well, he's a radiologist, but nonetheless. So how these folks have these weird ideas is beyond me, but it's been that way since the beginning of time. And I understand that even back in the Spanish flu epidemic, there was not only just a strong anti-vax community there as well, and the polio, but a bunch of doctors that stood up and say, no, we don't. So I don't know. It's a weird thing. And as you say, how can you be science-based and not believe that? Well, not everything in science is cut and dried, and there's disagreements and conflicts about things in all the sciences. And it just becomes, I think, more acute and emphatic when it involves health, right? Because that's life or death sometimes. We don't worry too much. Well, we're aware of the climate scientists' disagreement, that 1% that kind of say, oh, it's not real, and one thing or another. Well, the same goes on in astronomy and every other field, I imagine. There's
the other issue is our culture likes to stigmatize big pharma and taking medication. And I ran into that my whole life. I resisted treating my Crohn's disease even to the detriment of my own health. Tried strict diets only to get really ill and need hospital care.
Hey, Lydia, I was going to tell you something real quickly, because this is the first time someone has actually said this, and I have tried to say it, but I just never could explain it. I'm a progressive Democrat, and we have been fighting against big pharma, all this kind of stuff. We've been talking with big pharma. When the pandemic started, some libertarians, some even were on our show, were also against big pharma, but for different reasons. They took that and used it and convinced some actual progressive people that you're right, we got to be against big pharma because we said we were against pharma. No, and it was this manipulation of the reasons. And it was how they twisted it. When you said you're against big pharma, you said you're against my body, my choice. They stole that. They stole that as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was.
They'll hijack anything. The anti-vax community will take. Yes. I like to say it. They'll take whoever will have them. So they'll pander to whoever. They'll use race to pander to people. They'll use economics. They'll use why would they care about poor people? They just want poor people to stay sick. They'll say stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, pharma lobbies, I mean, they can really do some damage, right? They didn't really act on their best behavior all the time. But I also like to point out the reason that they get caught is because there are regulations. When you have the natural supplement industry is largely unregulated, how do you get caught breaking rules that don't exist? So they've tested natural products. Some of them have pharmaceutical analogs from China, heavy metals. A lot of these products that people think are natural are so contaminated and not even what it says on the label, but because there's this lack of regulation, they never get caught. People have had liver failure from supplements. This is something that's happened, and they want to sit there and say natural is better. Okay, but arsenic is natural too. So and I'm not saying that big pharma is perfect, but in terms of vaccination, this is a tool of medicine that's been around forever. It works, and I know COVID vaccinations may not be perfect in terms of other vaccines that are much better, but we'll get there.
What have you found has been most effective in getting people to open their minds? Because, as I say, most people are so tight in, and most people are probably not as intelligent and as persistent as you were to really get in and dig into this. Most people are happy.
Help people to challenge one. So what an anti-vaxxer likes to do when they're confronted is just throw a million things at the wall, see what sticks, and then run away. So it's called a Gish Gallop, or there's different debate techniques that they call it. I have an article where I dissect how they like to debate people while feeling they won while being wrong, horribly wrong at the same time. I would say if somebody comes to you, one thing, address one trope, right? Like, don't let them bring up more than one issue with vaccines. Address it one at a time. Usually there are things that are incontrovertibly true. Like the blood-brain barrier is mature at birth. Aluminum does not cross the brain from vaccination. That is environmental aluminum that they find. So these studies that they use to prove their points actually don't prove their points at all. So this study they'll share, well, they found, aluminum in the brains of 12 autistic people. Okay, but they didn't check the brains of regular people in that study. They didn't account for whether it was environmental or where that aluminum came from. We are exposed to aluminum every day in our diet.
Sure.
Every day, right? So just one little myth, address it. Don't let them bring up anything more than one, because then that's how they take it off the track or move the goalpost or whataboutism or whatever. You have to just address it one myth at a time, and that it can take time, because it's very psychologically uncomfortable to be wrong.
Exactly.
So it took me months to even make that call. It took me months, like I couldn't sleep. Like I had a hard time. Like it is a very psychologically difficult process to go through when you're leaving any kind of groupthink cult that is all a big part of your life, your lifestyle. So that's I'd say take it one myth at a time.
Well, Lydia,
and so what I know it's impossible to track this thoroughly, but do you have a sense of how many folks you've been able to bring out of the cult with you? Or
I have 200 people in my group, which we have 200 parents that we support each other. So it's a private group. We give each other a safe space. We only recommend evidence-based practice. People will sometimes start slowly, but it is not because they think an alternative schedule is better. It's purely out of anxiety. So I get that. So even in your own practice, maybe if you find a patient that's like scared, okay, let's try one vaccine, because sometimes just seeing their child do well with one vaccine is enough to go, oh, that wasn't so bad. And just say, listen, if you're worried, like, you don't underestimate the anxiety these parents are feeling when they are bringing their children in for those first vaccinations. Give them an email. Say, if anything goes wrong, email me. I'll talk to you. Like that, just having that lifeline, that support through those first vaccinations is so important.
This has been probably one of our most educational shows we've had.
For sure.
I would say in 3 years. Thank you so much. And we do need to wrap this up, and we would love to have you back.
Lydia, stay brave.
Yes,
I'm really
yes,
proud of
wonderful.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very
Thanks for
good.
having me. Thanks to the LatinX community for listening to what I have to say. And
Happy
Excellent. Thank you.
study. Ugh.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Hey, everybody, thanks for joining in and watching us and our view of what makes us great. And we appreciate you. We had a record viewership last week, so enjoy the show.
Yes. Bye, y'all. See you next week.
Up next is Two Queers in a Truck with Jenny and Christian. And hope you guys tune in. We'll see you in about 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you. Bye.